If you've ever traveled cross-country, say from New York to Los Angeles, you probably did it by airplane, maybe with a layover. If you're like most people, that took a few hours, possibly a lot of hours. And odds are that the trip was comfortable. There were snacks and movies and enough legroom to stretch out a little bit. You may have even made the same trip by car, which can take more than twice as long. And while you don't get free snacks, you do have the freedom to stop whenever you want, which is nice. But both of these modes of transportation pale in comparison to the original cross-country road trip taken by pioneers on the Oregon Trail. That route, roughly 2,000 miles, took an average of 4 months to complete. So if you wanted to drive from New York to Los Angeles without stopping once, you would have to do it over 4 months. That means nearly 30 hours of driving per day. Now, I call that a road trip. But while we often picture the Oregon Trail as one long, dusty march, endless walking, wagon wheels creaking, and dramatic river crossings, much of the trail was built on the quiet grind of daily chores. When the wagons stopped, the work didn't end. In fact, it often doubled because life on the trail didn't just involve travel. It meant creating a temporary home in the wilderness every single day. Each evening, after miles of walking beside a jostling wagon, pioneers had to make camp. The first task, finding the right spot. Flat ground was essential. No one wanted to sleep on a slope. A slight incline was fine and might even offer a pleasant view, but a steep downward slope could mean disaster during the night. While people slept, the ground beneath them could crumble, sending traveler and wagon crashing down a hillside. A slight incline could also pose a risk. Sometimes the soil was so loose that wagons could slide down hills, trapping people underneath them. As for rivers, those were necessary, but not too close. The water could be used for drinking, washing, and cleaning, but stagnant water could breed mosquitoes, and flash floods were a constant threat along many sections of the Oregon Trail. Ideally, there'd be some grazing for the animals, maybe a tree for shade. Once the site was chosen, the routine began. The first order of business was finding water for the animals. Any nearby streams or springs were carefully checked for the safety of both animal and human. Then it was time to unhitch the oxen. These poor animals had just hauled thousands of pounds for 10 to 15 miles. They needed rest, water, and food. The children often helped lead them to graze or drink. Some families staked their oxen to keep them from wandering, while others let them roam and just hoped they'd return in the morning. They didn't always. Losing an ox could end your journey. Not only did each family depend on the strength of their oxen to pull their wagon, they also relied on their meat and hides. So, if an ox got lost or killed, its absence could mean starvation. While the oxen rested, someone else did too. The driver, or teamster, had one of the most difficult jobs on the trail. Guiding a wagon along a rutted path for hours on end was hard, tiring work. After all, this wasn't a leisurely sightseeing tour. Travelers were looking to move as quickly as possible to reach the fertile lands at the end of the trail. So the teamsters drove hard and they drove fast. They spent all day urging their oxen forward, shouting at them to go faster, swishing at them with a bullwhip, and keeping watch for obstacles ahead. So by the time they stopped for the night, they were exhausted and eager to rest. After the oxen were secured, it was time to think about dinner. Along the Oregon Trail, meals were usually pretty simple. Common breakfast foods included flour and water, mush, eggs, if a family had hens, or bacon and biscuits. For pioneer children, though, breakfast was often the best meal of the day. Dinner might consist of something like boiled or brothy meat, vegetables, if available, and bread. Many families grew hardy vegetables like potatoes that could sustain them through most of the trip. But fresh produce was sometimes available, too. Families arriving late to an area might find wild berries, cherries, or plums, while others had the luxury of picking wild strawberries and blackberries along the trail. Even small fruits like these were nutritional powerhouses full of vitamins and minerals. They provided a welcome change from the bland taste of dried fruit and salted meat, though some pioneers kept diaries filled with descriptions of the bounty they found. Others focused on simply surviving. In her diary, Sarah Royce Clark described the daily search for wild berries. She wrote, "We pick up bunches of wild currants, gooseberries, and strawberries. We eat them as we pick. Such work as this does not tire the children, and they are almost as happy as if they were at play. With dinner eaten, it was time to focus on the next day's journey." Part of being a pioneer was planning ahead, and part of planning ahead was packing up quickly in the morning. To ensure a smooth departure, everyone had to pitch in and prepare. Most families set up their campsite in a way that made breaking camp easier. Tents were pitched near the wagon, and belongings were stored neatly inside, ready to be loaded up in the morning. Then, once everything was packed, the beds were rolled up and stowed away. No one wanted to waste time searching for stray blankets and pillows. The last thing anyone wanted was to leave something behind. So each evening, before settling in for bed, travelers performed one final head count, making sure that no item or person was missing. Then it was finally time to relax, though the amount of relaxation varied from family to family. Some parents preferred to send their children to bed early, giving them the night off from their arduous journey. Others believed that children should help with the daily routines, even those that seemed like adult busy work. For example, collecting firewood was a critical job. Wood was essential for cooking and warmth, and without it, a family couldn't survive on the trail. Pioneer children spent countless hours gathering kindling and firewood, and they weren't picky. Sticks and branches of any size were useful. One girl recalled her duties on the trail and wrote, "My brother, sister, and I were detailed to gather sticks for the fires. We gathered sticks of all kinds, but my particular job was to collect such as were small enough to be used as fire kindling. I learned to make a long-handled rake from a stick and vines, with which I could rake under the brush and pick up large quantities of the very finest kindling. I remember how proud I was when I was detailed to get up the fire alone. What a responsibility it seemed to me then to build the fires that would cook our supper and keep our folks from freezing during the night. It did not seem as though I could possibly be trusted to do it, yet it was expected of me. I did my best, and it gave me great confidence in myself to know that I had done what was required of me. When the sky grew dark and the temperature dropped, it was time to settle in for the night. The adults huddled around the fire, talking quietly while the children snuggled against their mothers or dozed off inside the wagon. If there was a spare blanket, the family's dog might get to curl up under it, too. Even with all the chores that needed doing, pioneers tried to enjoy their evenings around the campfire. They told stories, sang songs, and when they were lucky enough to have musical instruments, they made music together. Historian John Deoncard describes a typical scene in his book, The Oregon Trail and the Old Northwest. He writes, "In the evening, when the day's work was done, the family gathered around the fire, and the father, after the chores were assigned for the morrow, told of his experiences in earlier years or related some thrilling adventure until bedtime. At times, mother would suggest to him, and the children would join in singing with voices clear and strong. When the stars shone out in the firmament above, the children would lie in their blankets wrapped tightly in buffalo robes, listening to the howling of wolves and other wild animals until they fell fast asleep. As the sun rose each morning, the family had to start their routine all over again. Their home was wherever they parked their wagon, and the work of building a home never ended. Life on the Oregon Trail was tough. It was dirty, dangerous, and lonely. But even with all the hardship, life on the trail brought a community of people together. It took a village to cover 2,000 miles, and that village was made up of families who helped each other succeed. Thank you for watching. To learn more about the Oregon Trail, visit our website. Hey there, and welcome back to the channel. Do you ever wonder what life was like during pioneer times? Well, let's find out as we reveal 10 things pioneers did every day on the Oregon Trail. Number 10, starting a fire without matches. Another skill altogether. Not only did pioneers have to learn how to make fire without matches, they also had to contend with winds, rain, or dark skies. Flint and steel were carried by most families, but lighting a flame in these conditions required patience and practice. In drier months, the family could gather sticks and rocks around the campfire. Wetwood needed a fire saw. Pioneers learned to strike sparks from the flint and steel in a shallow, wide container to catch the spark. They used bow and drill sets or bamboo and fire pistons, but none of these were easy. Before starting a fire, pioneers gathered dry materials like leaves, pine needles, bark, and grass. These items were arranged in layers, kindling to fuel with space between each layer for the air to circulate and draw up the flames. Patience and persistence were key when trying to light a fire in wet weather. Number 9, hauling water. Water had to be fetched. This might mean hauling buckets from a nearby stream or walking a mile to the last clean water source. Water was necessary for drinking, cooking, and sometimes, when possible, for washing. Bathing was rare. Most people went weeks without a full wash. The water was valuable. A quick face splash, maybe a foot soak. That was luxury. Clothes, bedding, dishes, and people got pretty stinky. Laundry was done once every few weeks, if that. Dirty clothes piled up. Everyone stank equally, which oddly made it more bearable. You didn't notice how bad you smelled when everyone else smelled just as bad. No, meals. Cooking wasn't a quick microwave meal. Meals on the Oregon Trail were slow, basic, and repetitive. Flour, salt, bacon, coffee, and dried beans were staples. Bread was often made without yeast, just flour and water, rolled and cooked on a hot rock or in a skillet over the fire. It was called hardtack or journey cake, and it was about as flavorful as it sounds. If a family had preserved meat or fruit, it was rationed carefully. Sometimes someone got lucky and shot a rabbit or prairie chicken, but meat had to be eaten quickly or it would spoil. Salt was your best preservative. Sugar, if you had it, was worth more than gold. Meals were eaten sitting on the ground. Plates were tin or wood. Cups were shared. There were no napkins. Greasy hands wiped on trousers or skirts. Leftovers, if there were any, were packed for the next day. After dinner, someone had to clean the pans, stir the coals, shake out the bedding, and check the animals. The camp had to be quiet and secured before nightfall. And then, finally, the family could try to rest. Number 7, cleaning. After dinner, the cleanup crew had to get the campfire going again to cook the next day's breakfast. Someone had to clean the pans. Dishes were washed with water from a canteen or a nearby stream. Everyone pitched in. Children as young as 2 years old stirred the coals while their parents stoked the fire. Ashes were saved to make soap later. Most pioneers kept a small supply of wood near the campsite to use for starting fires. No, 6, tending to the animals. Oxen and cows were the primary draft animals. They pulled the wagons and provided milk. Their meat was saved for an emergency. Each morning, pioneers milked their cows and separated the milk into 2-day rations. The milk spoiled quickly in the heat, so it had to be used right away. When the cows were ready to give birth, the family got up early to help deliver the calves. They looked forward to the fresh meat and extra milk. Taking care of the animals was a lot of work. Every 2 hours during travel, someone had to drive the team, then switch with someone else. All day long, an ox team driver shouted gee and haw and woe to keep the oxen moving in the right direction. No, 5, traveling. Most days, the family woke before sunrise and started their trek as soon as possible. People walked behind their wagons, hitched to a pair of oxen or horses. The pace was slow, about 3 miles per hour. So it took all day to reach a campsite. Families traveled 6 days a week, stopping only for meals and rest breaks. The journey took most of the year from March to October. During the winter, the trail was too snowy and icy for travel. Storms could last for days. Sometimes the trail became a river. Often the river became the trail. Pioneers learned to ford streams and rivers. Men drove the wagons across while women and children walked in the shallow water to prevent the animals from drowning. When they reached higher ground, they camped and waited for the waters to recede. On the plus side, a little rain couldn't dampen their spirits. MUD was much more fun than being thirsty. Number 4, hunting. Most hunters carried a rifle with a heavy lead ball at the front. If they hit their target, they put the animal out of its misery quickly. Once the hunt was over, the men butchered the animal and processed the meat. Then they smoked, salted, and dried the meat to preserve it. Women cleaned and stretched the hides for leather. Tanning them took longer and required a special concoction of natural materials. Trapping small animals like rabbits was easy. Hunters could trap beavers, raccoons, minks, and foxes to trade their pelts for goods. Hunting and trapping were important for food and money. Pioneers relied on their hunting skills to stay alive. Number 3, trading. Bartering was common along the Oregon Trail. Sometimes people traded goods, services, or even teams of oxen for something else they needed. At trading posts, bartering could become complicated. The store owner had prices in mind for every item, so traders had to know what they were worth. Sometimes people traded for necessities like food, ammunition, tools, blankets, and clothing. Other times they traded for luxury items like whiskey, tobacco, and jewelry. Number 2, mending. The job of mending was endless. If a shoe sole wore out, the whole family suffered because walking barefoot on the rocky terrain was painful. Pioneers carried a repair kit with extra nails, thread, buckles, patches, and anything else they might need. They used every bit of leather, bone, and sinew to repair equipment, clothing, and shoes. Mending never seemed to end. Rations were low. Pioneers had to learn to patch everything from pants to pots. Each evening after chores and before supper, the family mended what they could. Working together made it go faster. 1. Surviving. Pioneer life was challenging. They faced many obstacles, including sickness, injuries, deaths, loneliness, isolation, exhaustion, hunger, and fear. They had to survive mentally and physically. Mental strength helped pioneers cope with the loss of loved ones and the monotony of daily life. Physical strength was necessary to push through exhaustion and pain. To survive, pioneers needed endurance, ingenuity, and determination. They had to be strong enough to walk behind a wagon for months or drive a team of oxen. Ingenuity helped them fix broken equipment with limited supplies. Determination kept them moving forward despite the difficulties they faced. Pioneers had to be resilient, adaptable, and resourceful. They had to be willing to change their plans and make the best of whatever situation they found themselves in. They needed to use what they had to solve problems and accomplish tasks. Above all, pioneers needed faith in themselves and each other. They had to believe that they could make it to Oregon and build a new life there. Faith gave them the strength to endure the hardships of the trail and the courage to face the unknown. Now it's time to hear from you. Did you enjoy this video? Let us know in the comments section below. Please like and share if you love learning about history. We'll see you next time. A long time ago, in an age when life was simple but hard, pioneers journeyed across America's wild frontier. With covered wagons creaking and oxen lowing, they traversed prairies and crossed rivers in search of new lives. Among them were the families, the Cranes and the Bartletts, who shared their everyday tale. This is the story of an ordinary day in the life of these pioneers. The sun had barely crested over the horizon when the first rays touched William Crane's eyelids. Even before the light, he was awake, his thoughts already on the day ahead. Sleep had not been a luxury they could afford the night before. The constant threat of wild animals prowling near their camp had ensured that. William sat up, the worn blanket falling away from his shoulders, revealing a nightshirt that had seen better days. Beside him, his wife Martha stirred, her face etched with the hardships of their journey. She, too, knew that rest was a rare commodity in their current lifestyle. Outside, the symphony of nature was just beginning. Birds twittered, crickets chirped, and the gentle rustle of the prairie whispered tales of the day to come. William, ever the pragmatist, wasted no time. He pulled on his coarse woolen trousers and a shirt of sturdy linen. His calloused hands, testament to years of toil, moved with practiced ease. For a man whose life was measured in hard work, every moment was precious. Martha, graceful despite the roughness of their existence, went about her morning ritual. Her task to prepare a breakfast fit to sustain bodies and spirits. Flour, water, and perhaps some dried meat would become bread, a staple that had sustained generations. Her movements were economical, each one honed to perfection through years of practice. The fire, coaxed to life by William, soon crackled merrily, lending its warmth to the nascent day and casting dancing shadows on the tents around them. Across the camp, the Bartletts were doing the same, readying themselves for another day on the trail. Samuel Bartlett, a man weathered by the sun and wind, was already up, tending to his animals. His wife Abigail, her face lined with both age and worrying, was preparing their meager breakfast. Their two children, Thomas and Mary, were helping as best they could, their innocence a stark contrast to the harsh realities of their journey. Soon, the air was filled with the aroma of baking bread, mingling with the savory scent of frying bacon. It was a simple repast, but to those who had little, it was a feast. As the sun climbed higher, so did the temperature, making the vast prairie shimmer like a sea of gold. The thermometer, if they had one, would have surely registered a sweltering day. Yet the pioneers pressed on, their wagons rumbling along the dusty trail. Children, too, had their roles. Young Thomas Bartlett, barely older than 6 summers, helped gather wood. Meanwhile, Mary, a few years his senior, assisted her mother with the cooking and cleaning. Life on the trail offered little respite, not even for childhood's sweet innocence. The journey continued, and as the hours passed, the wagons rumbled on, driven by the rhythmic creak of wheels over the terrain. The monotony was broken only by the occasional stream or the distant cry of a lonely bird. The vastness of the prairie had a way of testing one's spirit, blurring the line between hope and despair. As the sun began its slow retreat, casting long shadows across the land, the pioneers made camp for the night. Setting up camp was a well-rehearsed routine, a dance of sorts that had become second nature to them. Each family unit had its rhythm, its pace. The Cranes and the Bartletts, though different in many ways, were united in their purpose and their struggle. Fires were built, tents pitched, and the comforting aroma of cooking meals drifted into the twilight. The pioneers, weary from their day's journey, found solace in the simplicity of their tasks. In the shared stories and laughter, they forged bonds that transcended their individual struggles. For the Bartletts, their evening was often filled with quiet contemplation. After the day's work was done, Samuel would sit by the fire, lost in thought. Abigail, ever attuned to her husband's moods, would join him in silence, her presence a comfort in itself. Their children, Thomas and Mary, would play nearby, their laughter echoing across the prairie, a melody that tugged at the heartstrings of their parents. Meanwhile, the Cranes had a different rhythm. William and Martha, seasoned travelers, had perfected the art of survival. They worked with a quiet efficiency, their movements precise and economical. Theirs was a life measured in miles and rations, and they managed both with military precision. As darkness descended, the prairie transformed, becoming a canvas for the stars. The vast expanse of the night sky glittered like a million diamonds, a spectacle that never failed to amaze. The pioneers, their faces illuminated by the flickering firelight, would gaze upward, finding solace in the celestial tapestry above. The cool night air brought with it a respite from the day's sweltering heat. The campfire crackled, sending sparks spiraling into the night, each one a tiny dancer in the darkness. The silence was profound, occasionally broken by the crackling of the fire or the hoot of an owl. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a testament to the hardships and dreams that played out under this very sky. Sleep came, not always easy on the restless prairie, yet necessary for the journey's end. Dreams, too, had become a luxury, brief and elusive as moonlight on water. But in the stillness of the night, they found solace. Each breath a prayer for a safer tomorrow, at sunrise, the whole process reversed. It was a well-rehearsed routine that unfolded with the precision of clockwork. The morning light, filtering through the canvas of their tents, was their alarm. Fires were coaxed back to life, coffee brewed, and the aroma of baking bread mingled with the sounds of a busy camp. Oxen had to be rounded up, sometimes miles away if they'd wandered during the night. Their lowing echoed across the prairie, a call that answered the call of the day. William Crane, his face etched with the lines of a life lived outdoors, was already up. His movements, though, were not those of a man burdened by his years. As the sun climbed higher, the temperature began its relentless climb. The prairie shimmered under the intense sunlight, a mirage of heat waves distorting the clear blue sky. The thermometer, if they had one, would have recorded a stifling heat. Yet the pioneers pressed on, their wagons bumping along the dusty trail. The journey was not just physical, it was a test of endurance, of body and spirit. The isolation was profound, broken only by the occasional meeting with another wagon train. When it happened, there were greetings exchanged, news shared, and a brief respite from the solitude. But such encounters were rare. By noon, the heat was at its zenith. The sun, a blazing orb in the sky, seemed to pour its molten fire onto the earth. The wagon wheels rumbled on, a monotonous sound that echoed the relentless heat. The vastness of the prairie stretched unbroken, a sea of gold under a sky of endless blue. The pioneers, their faces etched with the toll of the journey, pressed on. They had to. There was no turning back. Their wagons, laden with the necessities and dreams of a new life, rumbled on, driven by the oxen that plodded steadily along the trail. The afternoon wore on, and with it, the heat began its slow retreat. The sun, now less harsh, cast long shadows across the land. As it dipped lower in the sky, the temperature eased, bringing with it a sense of relief. The prairie, bathed in the golden hues of the setting sun, seemed to sigh with contentment. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, the sky blazed with colors of orange, red, and purple, painting a farewell masterpiece. The pioneers, their day nearly done, watched in silent appreciation. For a moment, the vastness of nature humbled them, reminding them of their small place in the grand scheme of things. In the fading light, the wagons continued their trek, their wheels crunching on the dry earth. The oxen, sensing the day's end, walked with a newfound determination. The rumble of their footsteps mingled with the distant chorus of crickets, creating a lullaby of the prairie. As darkness fell, the wagons rumbled into their stopping point for the night. Fires were quickly built, casting flickering shadows that danced in the gathering gloom. The pioneers, their faces illuminated by the firelight, shared stories and laughter, finding solace in each other's company. The day was done, but their journey was far from over. And so, each day followed a rhythm: travel, stop, work, eat, sleep, repeat. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months, and the pioneers pressed on. The rhythm of their lives became the soundtrack of the prairie, a song of hardship, resilience, and the unwavering spirit of those who dared to dream of a new life on the American frontier. Hey there, and welcome to my channel. The Oregon Trail wasn't just a trail. It was a journey filled with hardships and challenges that tested the limits of the pioneers' endurance. In this video, we explore the daily routines on the Oregon Trail and the impact they had on the pioneers' physical and emotional well-being. So let's get started. Imagine waking up before the sun, the crisp morning air biting at your skin as you stretch out your stiff muscles after a night spent on a hard, uneven floor. Your home, a wagon bed covered with a thin blanket, offering little respite from the elements. This was the daily reality for the pioneers on the Oregon Trail. The first light of dawn meant it was time to rise and prepare for another day on the trail. There was no time for leisure or rest. Each moment was precious and each task important. One of their most critical early tasks was getting the campfire going. The fire was essential not just for warmth and cooking, but also for boiling water, making coffee, and, most importantly, purified drinking water. But gathering the necessary materials for a fire was no easy feat. Pioneers had to search for dry wood suitable for kindling and fuel. The constant dampness of the trail made this a challenging task, requiring them to be persistent and resourceful in their search. As the fire crackled to life, casting flickering shadows around the camp, it provided a sense of comfort and familiarity in an ever-changing landscape. The aroma of wood smoke mingled with the smell of coffee soon wafting through the camp, rousing other members of the wagon train from their sleep. With the fire going and the first few sips of coffee warming their bellies, the pioneers were ready to tackle the day's challenges. The men, women, and children all had chores to do, and the tasks were divided based on age and ability. Men were responsible for the more strenuous tasks like driving the oxen, repairing wagons, and setting up camp. Women managed the household tasks such as cooking, cleaning, and sewing, while also caring for the children. And even the smallest of hands were put to work collecting firewood, tending to the animals, and helping with the chores as best they could. The children's innocence was a source of strength during difficult times, offering a reminder of the hope and joy that awaited them in the fertile valleys of Oregon. Their laughter echoing across the plains provided a heartwarming counterpoint to the harsh realities of their journey. As the wagon train moved from one camp to the next, a community began to form among the travelers. They shared supplies, stories, and most importantly, their struggles. The isolation of life on the trail was eased by the presence of other families who understood their hardships and could offer support and companionship. This sense of community was vital to their survival. It offered emotional support in times of despair and practical help when the going got tough. Many formed friendships between wagons, families shared chores, supplies, even grief. When someone lost a loved one, the entire wagon train might pause, help dig a grave, and sing a quiet hymn. Community became survival. Still, the daily grind wore people down. Chores weren't just repetitive, they were physically draining. Blisters formed, backs ached, children cried, food ran low, tempers flared. And yet the chores never ended because the alternative was worse. Let the fire go out, no dinner. Let the oxen wander, no progress. Forget to collect water, no drink. The routine may have been dull, but it was also life-saving. And so each day on the Oregon Trail was a paradox, endless boredom, punctuated by moments of panic. Hardship wrapped in monotony. In the afternoon, the real challenge of the trail presented itself, driving the oxen. This was particularly daunting for those who had never worked with these massive animals before. Oxen were strong and stubborn, and handling them required patience, skill, and a lot of muscle. The pioneers had to learn how to manage the team, keep them on course, and ensure their safety. Accidents happened, and a sudden move from an ox could mean injury or even death. But the pioneers were a hardy bunch, and they quickly learned the ways of the oxen. Slowly, they built a rhythm with these gentle giants, understanding their moods and anticipating their moves. The teamwork involved in driving the oxen was another source of strength. Working together, the men guided the team, each playing a crucial role in ensuring the smooth movement of the wagon train. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the prairie, it was time to prepare for the evening. This meant setting up camp, a task that was as familiar as it was tiring. Each family member had a role. Tents needed to be pitched, fires tended, and meals prepared. Despite the physical toll, there was a certain satisfaction in these tasks. They were a testament to their adaptability, their resilience in the face of hardship. The simplicity of their meals, often consisting of basic ingredients like dried meat, beans, and flour, took on a special significance. Each dish was a celebration of sustenance, a reminder of the nourishment that sustained them on their arduous journey. As the family shared their meal, there was a sense of unity, of gratitude for the food that sustained them and for the love that bound them together. After the meal, there was little time for rest. The pioneers were constantly vigilant against the threat of wild animals, especially at night. They had to guard their camp, protect their supplies, and ensure their personal safety. This meant keeping a watch throughout the night, a task that fell to different members of the group. Sitting around the flickering light of the campfire, sharing stories, and singing songs, they found solace in the company of others. These moments of camaraderie helped ease the loneliness of the trail, reminding them that they were not alone in their struggles. The night was filled with the sounds of the wilderness, the crickets chirp, the owls hoot, and the occasional howl of a coyote. But inside the circle of firelight, the pioneers felt a sense of security. The darkness outside the camp was a reminder of the challenges they faced, but it was within that darkness that they found the strength to keep moving forward. But as the moon climbed higher in the sky, it was time for the pioneers to rest. Sleep was their only respite from the unrelenting demands of the trail, but even sleep was not always peaceful. Dreams were filled with the sights and sounds of the trail, and the constant fear of danger lingered at the edge of their consciousness. They slept in shifts, taking turns to guard the camp and ensuring everyone got some rest. Fatigue was a constant companion, a dull ache in their muscles and a heavy weight in their eyes. Each day on the trail took its toll, and the relentless rhythm of travel, work, and vigilance was draining. Each day on the Oregon Trail was a testament to the pioneering spirit, a blend of drudgery and determination, hardship and hope. It was a journey that tested the limits of human endurance and revealed the true meaning of community and survival. As the pioneers pressed on towards the setting sun, they carried with them the stories of their days, tales of hard work, camaraderie, and the unwavering pursuit of a better life in the heart of America's untamed wilderness. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos about the Oregon Trail. We've got a ton more videos about the Oregon Trail that you'll love. Just click right here to keep watching. This is a story about the Oregon Trail. It's also a story about survival. Hi, I'm your host. This is part 2 of our series on the Oregon Trail. If you missed part 1, you can find it on our channel. Just search for Oregon Trail. Also, new episodes premiere every Thursday. So, subscribe and get notified so you don't miss an episode. It was June 1848 when the first wagon train arrived at the Willamette Valley. 3 cheers echoed across the valley as the travelers stepped out of their wagons, shaky but unbroken. Some wept with relief, others fell to their knees in prayer. They had made it. Now they could begin their lives anew in this lush land of rolling hills and meandering rivers, where towering trees provided cool shade and an abundant forest sustained life. Life would be good here, except it wasn't good for everyone. The travelers had encountered many obstacles on the way, and not all of them were natural. When a group of hunters left the main party in Missouri, they found themselves ambushed and massacred by natives. A child, only 14 years old, was scalped and left for dead, but survived. He described the attack in his diary. The Indians had already killed 2 of our men and wounded 3 others before anyone could load their guns. We were all running for our lives. One fellow turned to run off up the bank, but a large Indian held out his tomahawk, placed it on the ground, and motioned for him to come forward, and then scalped him. Another one picked up a small child, tossed him up in the air, and caught him by the scalp. Then he peeled off his scalp while the child screamed. It was a horrid sight to behold. On the Santa Fe Trail, a gang of cattle hands ambushed a lone traveler and robbed him. In Texas, a man accidentally shot another traveler in a fit of anger. And in Utah, 2 rival companies battled with pistols over a land dispute. Most wagon trains traveled with armed men who kept a sharp lookout, not only for Native Americans, but for each other. Companies often competed for prime campsites, water sources, and hunting grounds. Sometimes the competition turned ugly. At one point, a group of hunters from a company called the Ashley and Smith left their wagon train in present-day New Mexico and headed north to trap beaver. While they were gone, a fight broke out in the camp between 2 women. Soon the whole wagon train was embroiled in a shouting match. Someone fired a gun, panic seized the crowd. When the hunters returned to camp, they found 13 people dead and 9 wounded. An investigation revealed that the shooting had been an accident. One man had tripped over a gun and pulled the trigger, setting off a chain reaction of gunfire. But the damage was done. The Ashley and Smith Company was broken, and the incident left an indelible stain on the memory of the trail. In spite of such incidents, thousands continued to head west along the Oregon Trail. Most were driven by the promise of land. The U.S. government had begun offering 160-acre homesteads to anyone willing to settle in the Oregon Territory. To qualify, you had to be at least 18 years old and able to support yourself. You couldn't have been convicted of a felony or participated in a rebellion against the United States. You couldn't be living in a state-supported institution, and you had to file your claim in person. It was hard to believe, but some people would literally rather die trying than remain where they were. One such person was Sylvia Jernett. She was born a slave in Kentucky, but in 1847, she married a free black man named John Jernett. Together, they purchased their freedom and set out for Oregon. They walked much of the way, pulling a handcart filled with their meager possessions. After 4 months, they reached the Columbia River. Once there, they boarded the ship that would take them down river to the settlement. When the ship's captain refused to allow John to bring his gun aboard, John bought a pistol. This would prove fatal. As soon as the ship docked, John went ashore to hunt, but he forgot that gunpowder was not allowed in the settlement. The slightest spark could ignite the cargo of dried goods and blow the town to smithereens. As onlookers crowded around John, watching him shoot his pistol into the air, a passing spark ignited a pile of flour sacks. Before long, the entire town was ablaze. When soldiers arrived on the scene, they arrested John, believing he started the fire on purpose. He was sent to Alcatraz, a military prison on an island in the middle of the Columbia River. Sylvia was forced to watch him leave from a distance, shackled and guarded. From her jail cell, Sylvia wrote to President James K. Polk begging for her husband's release. Her pleas fell on deaf ears. In Oregon Territory, a black man could not testify in court, could not make a contract, could not vote, could not even own property. John was sentenced to death. On September 1848, John Jordan became the only person ever hanged for a crime in Oregon Territory. His crime, possessing a firearm in a prohibited zone. Sylvia spent her remaining days in Oregon alone, refusing to speak to anyone. She died a few months after arriving in Oregon and was buried beside her husband. Not all stories of the Oregon Trail are of death and destruction. There are tales of love, too. To such lovers were Samuel Parker and Eliza Slocum, who met on the trail. In 1843, Both were members of the Sinclair Wagon Company, which left Illinois in April and traveled through Kansas, Nebraska, and Wyoming. The journey took 15 months. Along the way, Parker kept a detailed journal, noting not only the landscape and weather, but his feelings for a certain Miss Eliza Slocum, whom he first saw on the banks of the Vermilion River in Kansas. "There is a young lady traveling with this company," he wrote, "whose angelic appearance and amiable manners have captivated all our hearts. She possesses a mind that is highly cultivated, a heart that is generous, and a beauty that is unsurpassed. In short, she is altogether lovely and is the idol of the company." Parker wrote that he asked Eliza's father for her hand in marriage, but her father refused because he didn't want his daughter marrying someone he didn't know well. Undeterred, Parker waited until the end of the journey to propose again, and this time Eliza said yes. In 1844, the American Medical Association published Parker's journal, which contained the story of his courtship along with descriptions of the land and its inhabitants. The book was a sensation and prompted more people to head west. Some say that Parker embellished his story for attention, but one thing is certain: his tale captured the imagination of readers back east. By 1864, an estimated 400,000 pioneers had traveled the Oregon Trail. Those who made the journey left behind a legacy of innovation. To survive the trek west, pioneers developed new technologies and refined old ones. In particular, the covered wagon became an iconic symbol of the frontier. Covered wagons weren't new. European settlers had used them since the 1700s to move heavy loads of freight. But in America, settlers adapted these heavy wagons to suit their needs. They were built low to the ground for stability and durability and covered with a canvas top that could be rolled up during the day and secured at night to protect passengers and supplies from the elements and bandits. Each wagon could carry up to 10 tons of supplies and was pulled by 6 to 10 oxen, which were slower but much more dependable than horses. Pioneers averaged about 15 miles per day, stopping every evening to pitch camp. Life on the trail was hard. Food was scarce and temperatures soared to dangerous heights inside the wagons. But there was one treat that made the trip a little more bearable. In 1844, a Swiss immigrant named George Fritchie invented a portable stove that ran on either wood or charcoal. It was lightweight, easy to carry, and produced minimal smoke. His brother Joseph joined him in the United States, and together they mass-produced the stoves, selling as many as 300 a day. Not everyone followed the wagon trails. Some travelers preferred to walk, others traveled by riverboat. In 1831, French-Canadian explorer Gaston de Saint-Pierre established the first steam-powered ferry service on the Columbia River. He named his fleet the Astoria. The name would become synonymous with ferries along the Columbia and the Willamette. The boats could carry 50 passengers and 50 tons of freight for a fare of $1.50 per ton. For those traveling the Oregon Trail, however, no amount of money could guarantee a smooth ride. The trail itself was rough, rocky, and rutted. At times, it became so overgrown that travelers had to cut branches and vines with axes. Later, the trails grew so crowded that pioneers began numbering stations along the route. These numbered stations helped travelers keep track of their progress and estimate how long it would take them to reach their destination. At Independence Rock in Wyoming, pioneers would stop to carve their names and the year into the granite. Today, more than 100 years later, the inscriptions are worn smooth by time and wind, but they serve as a reminder of the thousands who stood before you and walked this path to the west.